question.
Go ahead.
It's about how to be self-reliant when there are many Dhamma teachers all claiming essentially their own technique, view, process. What is the way that one can become self-reliant before right view?
No, self-reliance starts with right view. That's the peril of Putujana's situation. Yeah. So that's why you have to be extra careful, and extra honest, extra transparent. So you're not you're not acting out of mere preferences, but actually like sound reasoning, using your intelligence to discern, and knowing that for as long as you are not self-reliant, well, you should not entirely rely on somebody else and take for granted. But everything has to be investigated, in other words, with the goal of developing that self-reliance. Yeah. Obviously, all of this needs to be done on the basis of keeping the precepts, sense restraint.
And so how many so-called Dhamma teachers actually have true self-reliance as a goal in their teaching? Because if that's not the goal,
that's exactly.
Then that's already an
that's
issue
one
that
of
you
the,
can discern.
One of the criteria you can start seeing then. Where does this teaching lead?
I have another question. If no one else does.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, in the gradual training, all the way up to Jhana, the Jhana would be the right meditation.
Sure.
So, in that gradual training, it doesn't exactly express he achieves right view. So, in the gradual training, it brings about Jhana, but it doesn't explicitly mention right view. But right view is a prerequisite for Jhana, as I understand.
Yeah, usually the gradual training is taught to the monks. They're the ones that undertook the training. So generally, unless it's other way around, when Buddha is talking to the monks, unless it's clearly stated that the monk does not have the right view, they would have the right view.
Okay.
So bhikkhus and bhikkhus this, bhikkhus you should contemplate this, it's already presupposed that they understood what the practice is. Otherwise the Buddha wouldn't be talking on the level as if they already know what the practice is, and then encouraging them further. So there were instances when some of the bhikkhus didn't even have the right view, and those suttas they would have it clearly states it, and then they would usually at the end of that sutta get the right view and so on. Having said that, you don't have to have the right view to have jhana. You just need to be thoroughly withdrawn, mind dried up from sensuality. But again, any instruction, any notion, any contemplation that you might do that would result in that today is known on account of the Dharma and the suttas. So it would be highly unlikely that you would be able to free your mind from sensuality, overcome it in jhana, and not understand other much kind of lower aspects from the suttas, such as Four Noble Truths and so on. So it would be unlikely that you wouldn't get the right view. But say even again theoretically, you still don't get the right view. If you have developed jhanas, means your mind would have already been pure from all those pollutions. 95%, let's say, which means it would be much more likely, much easier to then get the right view because there are less obstructions obscuring it. That's the difference when the Buddha would say some person has a lot of dust in their eyes, some person doesn't. In other words, some person's mind is much more developed, someone else's isn't, and they would need much more like instruction repeated and so on, and would take a lot longer for them to get the right view. But if the mind is developed from the things that are obscuring this understanding, then if you turn it directly towards the understanding, it won't take that much, because as I said, there's not much standing in the way.
So you don't need to wait to have the right view before starting the gradual training, as far as I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's, you know, but by doing it, you actually have a chance to understand it for what it is, and by doing so get the right view. But as long as that doesn't mean that people should be doing a technique that they think is the gradual training, they will then bring the pleasure of jhana, they will then result in the right view, because that's seriously wrong view. So in the process of doing the gradual training, you need to be uprooting your wrong views about where the practice is, the place of sense restraint and withdrawal, that self-transparency. So, and that's what I'm saying, like if you start keeping the precepts rightly, not relying on the authority of a teacher, not relying even on a community in that sense, or a tradition, but doing it internally, as solely dependent on your determination, your upholding of that direction, it would be highly unlikely that you would remain non-transparent about your motives and expectations and other kind of views you might have. But usually, as I said, when people start the gradual training, they would take on the precepts on account of one of these factors, so that they don't have to think for themselves, or they don't have to doubt it, they don't have to second guess it every day. And it's like, no, you do have to. That's kind of the point. That's how you realize the extent of the hindrances, of the doubt, of the mind, and so on. So understanding how to do the gradual training rightly, see, that's already something that can be developed in people. Like, it's not just you read these steps and do them, because each and one of those steps, there are layers you can peel off of until you do it rightly. In the beginning, it won't be correct, for sure. But so yeah, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try anything until you get the right view. But you need to recognize that whatever you try without the right view, well, it won't be right for that reason.
When I'm practicing like restraint, just in regards to non-activity per se, meaning not trying to do anything, particularly out of any hindrance that might happen, I get maybe a point where it feels like any investigation I do is out of the desire to get rid of the doubt about it. So it just feels more pleasant to not think about it.
Well, yeah, so as I said, it's not like something you can just stick to one way, so never act out, never do this, because again, it depends on why you're doing it at the time. So if it's too tight, you need to loosen it. If it's too loose, you need to tighten it. So if you are actually preferring the pleasure of non-investigation, that's probably a good sign that you should start investigating. Yeah. And even if your mind is coming out of desire, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's not, because otherwise it would be pleasant to investigate.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you realize desire is where the pleasure is. Yeah.
Perhaps another factor in questioning the authenticity of a teacher or a teaching is to find out how prepared the teacher is to having discussions. Because somebody might say, no, this is my practice, this is my method, it's working for me, and based on that they basically block everything else. But if there's no attitude to even be open to alternative views, or to give reasons and arguments for why they think what they're doing is right.
Yeah,
Then that's
people can
already
be open to views, but no. Can you actually reason your position, give arguments, not just like, I'm not hearing any of this. This is the way I did it. That's it. Finished story. Yeah. So like, can you ask questions? Can you get the corresponding answer to what you asked? Not like a generic, whatever you asked, you just get, well, watch your nostrils, or chant this mantra, or let go, everything. Whoever comes, whichever else, is just the same thing. Just let go. Just chant. Just sit cross-legged. that's again, if that were the way out, well, surely we would have come across it in the suttas as a way out. But it was like quite much more elaborate, much more layered, as I said before. So that is definitely actually a factor you can see even on the basis of someone else's instruction, whether it's just an enclosed kind of faith-based, just do this, or there is some intellect behind it, so to speak. There is some reasoning there, clear kind of reflection that can then be, shared, questioned, and so on, explained differently, and so on. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely important, actually.
In the suttas, whoever would come to the Buddha with a question, sometimes even quite antagonistic, wanting to debate, he would always be able to answer every question.
Yeah.
It was, doesn't matter who, from what direction. I mean, apart from those questions he refused to answer, but obviously then he would give reasons for refusing to answer those questions. So it's like
the ones that were based on the wrong premise.
Yeah, and and also the seclusion is a factor. There's this discourse where somebody approaches the Buddha and says, well, we have all these different wanderers and they have all these views. How can you now know which one is right? And then he does say, okay, one factor is, do these people actually practically delight in seclusion and not just hang out with other people the whole time? That's now another thing. So that's basically even regardless of, this might be a sort of lesser standard, but still, right? Because if that factor is not there, it's very questionable whether there's sufficient strength in the mind to have the right kind of discernment. So, so that's another factor.
I would say maybe it's another factor thing to be aware of in this thing is that it's not necessarily just about like choosing a particular teacher that you then say, oh yeah, now that's the one that I've settled on and I'm fairly sure that that's, because that would be obviously making yourself dependent on this. I think you need to kind of keep in mind that the only way really that you'll have a criteria to know which teacher, if there even is one, for example, like you don't even need to take for granted that there is even one teacher out there who is teaching the same thing. What needs to be the priorities that you yourself know what's right and what's wrong for yourself, and then from that perspective you would be able to be sure, okay, this teaching I'm sure because I've really trained in it and I've verified it for myself that I can see.
What about if somebody can't help? They just can't help, but say, well, this is my teacher, I'm so inspired. What do? Do they go and find another one, or what do? How do they deal with that? Because everything that this person says, everything just resonates. He's the right teacher, and that's it. But again, you don't know that. So what do you do in that occasion? How can you know whether your inspiration is right or wrong? I mean, you're factually inspired, you're factually uplifted, you factually find sense in what's being said. You just stop caring about anybody else, any other instruction. But how do you now not blind yourself with that? What do you do?
Take the medicine of the doctor. Don't take it on faith. You have to actually apply it and
okay, the application. But do you have something else to add? Or?
And recognize this blind faith, as a hindrance.
Maybe not as a hindrance, but recognize it as a factor there and then question that. Like, so you don't have to deny it, or I must find another one, or I must undo the inspiration, but it's like, what is it that I'm finding inspiring? Is it stuff that are genuinely inspiring? Or is it just the character of this person? The way he speaks, the way he moves, the way he acts, that I just find, that's the right guy or something. Or is it, no, factually, on the basis of my previous practice and everything else, things that are said, that's what you find inspiring. Things that you're required to do as a practice, that's what you find inspiring, and so on.
Yeah, okay, so I was if it's that, as in if it's genuinely things that have made you understood things that you didn't hear from anybody else, and that have actually made you see things in a different way, not just like, oh, this clicks with what I was already thinking, sort of thing. Then, yeah, that's a kind of a fairly good criteria. But even then, I would say that it's still not.
Oh, yeah, you still have
to do it.
Yeah.
And that's
but it's like, so you might have inspiration, and then you start questioning that as to what is the basis for it, what's your motivation behind. See if you're afraid to question what that teacher says. Not necessarily with him if he's on the other side of the world, but with yourself. So it's like, okay, I got it now, I understand what he's saying, it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. And then you come across the opposing view. Oh, is there a passionate reaction to that? Is there an upset? Is there a defense mechanism? In which case, again, that still does not necessarily mean you're wrong, but you need to recognize, yeah, but why? So if there is a threatening view, the only reason I would be afraid or feel defensive is because I'm not entirely certain in what I think I understood. So then you use that experience, pretty much, that occasion to, okay, so then I need to recognize that I need to understand more of this. Or if there is no more in that teaching, then you realize, well, I need to then find a teaching that will be impervious to doubt. And even if I come across the opposing views and so on, that will not be able to sort of immediately switch me into that mode of, oh, I must defend this, or I'll just turn a blind eye, I won't think about it. So intentionally, sometimes intentionally you will have to bring up the doubt in regard to what you think you understood. And then feel the weight of it, and then, see if what you understood remains there. Like, of course, at the same time, you know, when I say bring up the doubt, it doesn't mean like just start spinning out of control on account of doubt, but bring it up and leave it there. And then see what understanding you have, and what aspects of it are you doubting? Is it the irrational just pressure of doubt, or there are genuinely things that lack in clarity, in which case that clarity needs to be developed? And when there are no more things that lack in clarity, you just realize you're just going around repeating the same stuff, or in other words, answering the same things to the questions your own doubt is asking, then you recognize, okay, now this is just the hindrance of doubt, just sort of acting for its own sake. So then you stop until the mind calms down. But then you can bring it up again. If you're too calm or find too much pleasure in not provoking these reflections, then you should do it in that sense. Yeah. Just to see if the solid understanding of it is there and whether it would stand the test or not.
But a lot of our discussion so far has been based on this premise that the emphasis is on understanding, which isn't necessarily the case for, I think, a lot of interpretations of the Buddha's teaching, where, I mean...
Oh, right, sure, yeah. Well, yeah, that's, as we said in the beginning, that will easily... There will be a criteria that will easily sort of remove a lot of things that are presented as the Buddha's teaching. Because, again, if they don't bring understanding and the clarity in regard to the nature of suffering, nature of tanha, the escape, and so on, if they teach you that, if they teach those things as some sort of experience, they will just occur to you on account of certain practices, you can pretty much safely dismiss that in the beginning right away.
Which is difficult to see, I think. I mean, based on the predominance of most Buddhism today.
Yeah. I would say. So that's where you come back to that transparency and so on. If you just, whatever you found appealing, whatever you're doing, whatever your practice is, don't forget about your own motivation in regard to it and start questioning it. Like, why, and does it add up? And start learning the suttas. And when I say learning, I mean investigate the meaning, not just sort of memorize the Pali and the historiological context of the texts and stuff like that. No, they actually try to understand what's meant by those things said 2,500 years ago. What do they refer to here and now in this experience while I'm reading the suttas? Those are the general categories of the human mind, of the five aggregates. So they're there while you're reading about them, but you're not seeing them. So you have to be understood at that immediate level.
Yeah, I suppose one reason why it's quite difficult, I mean, it is difficult to start that process because the sutras are very, when you first come to them, abstract and kind of weird. Like, why is this emphasis? Why is he putting emphasis on this and this? And yeah, that investigation obviously then can lead you into then an understanding of why emphasis is on the body, or conceiving, or what does that mean? Yeah, that.
But also again,
in my experience now,
one thing that's sort of almost always overlooked is whom those sutras apply to. So it's like, oh, well, do I even meet the prerequisites of a someone? And I don't mean like, am I formally ordained or something, but am I living withdrawn, keeping the precepts, secluded, to what extent? Because that is kind of, as I said, the basic threshold that then the Buddha would teach or instruct. Yeah, sure, you had cases of householders becoming sotapannas and so on upon talking to the Buddha, but good luck with that now. Where are you gonna
it was a different time.
But even then, it was the same procedure, so to speak. He would first gladden the mind, i.e. turn it away from sensuality and household worries. Then, when that mind is gladdened and sort of calmed, he would then talk about the perils of sensuality. Because if he just talks about perils of sensuality right away, on a mind that's not even gladdened or composed to any extent, well, that's not going to be taken rightly. So then you gladden the mind, then he would teach about the perils of sensuality and the value of escape. And then they would understand it. And sure, they might then choose to go back to their kind of household duties if they had children and family and so on, but it's something they cannot not forget. So you can say they were lucky in a way, they were, but even then it was not some magical shortcut, it was still the same thing. So now you don't have to Buddha, so first you need to, again, gladden the mind and withdraw your mind from household worries. Then you have to start seeing the peril and contemplating, invoking the peril of sensuality so that the mind turns away. And then craving and Four Noble Truths won't be that far away. But most people's attitude is just replace one thing with the other. And not really undo and then build up on top of that undoing by undoing more and more and more. And that's really the problem. Yeah.
Might be worth pointing out as well that in average householder's life in the time of the Buddha,
it's very different.
It's not equal to the average householder's life.
The access to sensuality, comfort. I mean, I bet
really
kings back then did not live as comfortably and luxuriously as people today live, generally.
Which means when you pick up sutta, you're reading the sutta with that sensuality.
You're reading from a completely wrong place, as in you're not even aware that it doesn't know that. So, again, you can start learning, sure, and then start undoing, peeling off these layers, as I said, but if you just ignore that whole situation you are in, your own situation, and then just go straight into nama rupa and conceivings and mula pariyaya sutta and this, it's just going to be an abstract theory, which is exactly how it happens. You have PhDs in Buddhism, fluent in Pali, and not even being able to keep the 5 precepts. Professors and people like that. And it's just not Dhamma. Even if it's just the Pali you speak, it's not the Dhamma. And even if technically somebody, 1 in 1,000 people, can become a sotapanna with very little sense restraint and so on, because they have so many other faculties developed, sure, but that's not the standard. That was not standard back then, and it's not standard today.
Yeah, celibacy is not the opposite of a household life. It's possible to be a household and live celibate.
Exactly.
There's an easy mistake that is made, I've noticed nowadays.
Yeah, well, it always goes in the kind of monks have to be celibate. So, but I can't be a monk because of some practical reasons. I have a mother to support, a family. Thus, I don't have to be celibate.
Yes.
That's the reasoning there.
Yeah.
But it is still at the same time means because I can't be a monk, thus I don't have to be celibate, but I can still practice the Dharma.
Yeah, that's a bit of a mix-up right there. Yeah.
Yeah, so like again, person can just, if you think like I can't be a monk, but then at the same time being celibate or keeping the 8 precepts, something like that, well, that's not necessary, you can practice Dharma by keeping the 5 precepts. Just ask yourself, what do you have to lose if you keep the 8 precepts? Would that obscure the Dharma practice or would that enhance it? What do you have to lose? And when I say precept, that really what it means. Whether to the extent of engagement with sensuality, like the other ones, whether you eat at 12:45 or 9:30, it's pointless. It's not. It's just that don't overdo it. Don't indulge it. Same. Sleeping in high luxurious places means how you spend your days. You're just in this luxury and comfort, sleeping all the time, lazy, stretching around like a wild boar after the meal, as the Buddha says in the suttas. Or is it a simpler life whereby you don't overindulge in sleep, you don't overindulge in food, and you're celibate? That's the 8 precepts. You're not beautifying yourself for the sake of it, but if you stink after work, put some deodorant on if you have to go among other people. You're not doing it for the wrong reasons. You're not doing it for beautification or attraction. You're just doing it so people don't complain and harass you. Have a shower and so on. So the point is, it all boils down to that, the 3rd precepts and the level of withdrawal from sensual desires, sexual desires in particular. So when 8 precepts means basically celibate, that's the emphasis there.
Say that something I thought about before in terms of that difference between the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts. Just that it's not about, like you just said, it's not about the specificity of the precepts, but the 5 precepts are more like things that are just always unwholesome. And like it would be good for everybody to keep them, whether they want to practice the Dharma or not.
Exactly.
Whereas 8 precepts is more on the level of just, okay, what's the kind of relatively bare minimum type of lifestyle that kind of can set up around myself, context for that's suitable for being watchful of my intentions, being moderate in eating, being wakeful, being, putting all that effort in. So like, okay, I need to live simply, I need to just, eat for the right reasons, can help to sometimes limit the time, not just entertain myself with distractions, and obviously celibacy. So it's like...
Yeah, like the food precepts, the monks some of the monks would go pinnabat at night. In the beginning, there was no stipulation there. Then there were lots of practical issues arising with that. Attacked by wild animals, robbers, scaring people, and so on. So then the Buddha said, "I'll just do it between like the dawn and the noon. Do it at the right time where kind of things are quiet, people are out, it's daylight. It's just safer." But then even then, some monks would not eat just one meal a day. They would eat during that period of time. They would eat, 2 or whatever. Then the Buddha encouraged them to eat 1 meal a day, as he does. But he never made that into a rule either. So it's just if you have the right context, you can see the nature, the purpose of the 5 precepts or 8 precepts, and then not fall into these technicalities. Oh well, see, technically it's 5, not 8. Again, it's like, where's your intention behind all of that? Where's your motivation? And when you start getting the right context, you go like, keep the 5 precepts with celibacy. Why not do that? Like, sure, maybe the meal is served at your work at 4:30, whatever, in the evening. You can't, but fine, don't eat anything before, eat it there, and that's it. So you don't have to technically then follow these guidelines, but just keep the 5 precepts, which, as we said before, it's the basic wholesome behavior, and then add celibacy to it for the third precept. So I think that for many people that will be certainly enough to start in the right direction of that developing transparency and so on. But if you can keep the celibacy precepts, you won't have a problem with not sleeping on a high luxurious sleeping place or eating 1 meal a day or something like that. None of that would be an issue. Perfumes, well, who cares about it now? Yeah, because it's really, it all boils down to that one. That's the main strength, the main pull, the main issue, the main obstacle.
Regarding the pressure of sexuality, in this type of environment or in other monastery environments I've been to, it seems like just the reduction in the sort of stimulus of what's happening around you, like, reduces it like so much.
Yeah, of course.
And then as soon as I go back, it's like
senses are bombarded.
everything is like, it's like pressuring. It's like, it felt like maybe for a certain extent of time that defilement had been like very easily been pushed away.
Right.
But then as soon as I'm back in the city environment and I'm walking in the street and I'm keeping my eyes downcast and everything is, pressuring me, it's like as if I've lost progress. So to say. So where is the development? Is it to seclude yourself until essentially you're an anagami in regards to?
Well, the development is in how far you would act out.
Yeah.
And if you're not acting out, the development would be on the level of how pressured you are, because that pressure would lessen. With the time, with the right understanding, with the contemplation of when you're not pressured, with truly understanding the peril of centrality, as we spoke before, the bait, the dissatisfaction, and really cementing those contexts and that perspective. The unsuitable environment will still bombard your senses, and that will always be a form of harassment. Now, for anagami or an arahant, that harassment of his senses is not something that he can sort of act out of. It's just inconceivable. Right. Because the peril, the bait has been completely shunned, understood, correctly abandoned. But they still feel the harassment. Their eyes are still harassed with a perception that wants to pervert itself, so to speak. The ugly wants you to see it as beautiful, and so on. There was at the Ratapala Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya where he was already, if not fully enlightened, he was already way beyond sensuality. When he went home and the father tried to entice him first with the wealth, got his wives to try and seduce him, and he says, stop harassing me. Like, all this is harassment. So it's not that he was like oblivious to what was happening, the significance of those acts of seductive behavior or the value of gold and so on, but he could not see it for what it is. So he told father off, told him better to put that gold at the bottom of the river because it would bring less suffering their way, and called his wives sisters, and they kind of got a bit upset and fainted or something. But he was factually, like, I don't say annoyed in the terms of angry, but his senses were being bombarded the same. So that's why Anagami Arahant would not be able to live. Well, you had Anagamis that live household lives, but an Arahant would not be able to live a household life. Because simply why would he bear annoyance and harassment of the senses that have no desire towards those things? So it's just discomfort, basically. It's factually uncomfortable. Sensual perceptions. And see, but when undeveloped mind meets sensual perceptions, feels that discomfort, knows no other escape from it other than going towards the pleasure that discomfort offers in return. And that's it. You took the bait. It's exactly the bait. So that's the progress. Okay. Not going in the direction of the bait, regardless of the discomfort. And then sometimes you will just have to avoid discomfort. If it's too much pressure, it's better to upgrade the environment where you won't be as pressured. But then don't confuse that for progress.
Yeah.
You still recognize that, well, but have I seen the peril, the danger, and vomited the kind of the desire out and so on, or am I just sheltered here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, if you're transparent, you know the answer, even without having to go back to the environment that will provoke you.
Yeah. So the bait is the pressure.
Well, the bait is the pleasure that you get if you give in to the pressure.
Mm.
The bait is hidden in the pleasure, let's say it like that. So acting out towards it means biting, taking up the bait.
It's the gratification, the danger, and it also could be the escape when you understand it.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like putting honey on a razor blade.
Yeah.
And then licking it.
Well, the poisonous drink, the similar in the soothers, yeah. That's the subtlety of sensuality it's the subtlety of the bait. You don't really see it. Your senses do not perceive. Your eyes, ears, they don't see anything that's disagreeable and so on. But the mind is factually pressured by it.
Yeah.
And if you, on that level, you discern the bait, then you know that there is a poison in a drink that is otherwise undetectable by your senses. But now the knowledge that it is poisonous, that cannot change. So although you can't smell it, you can't smell the poison, you can't touch it, you can't see it, but you can know that it's there. And when you know that it's there, no amount of pressure will make you take that drink. When you fully discern that it is there actually. You see it on that mental level. Because as we said before, if it weren't, why does sensuality need to pressure you towards acting? If it's wholesome, if it's good, why does it need to bombard you and trick you and manipulate you and control you? Why does it have a nature of a trap? Why do like if it's generally good, why is it set up in a way that I end up being trapped? And that's the whole point. It's like you could recognize the pattern and you see, so this, I don't know the implications of this setup, but I know that it cannot be for my welfare. As the sutras would say, he knows that like a hunter does not set up a trap for the welfare of the deer. So the monk reflects that anything that has a nature of a trap, hey look, cannot be for my welfare. I don't know who set it up, I don't know why, and I don't need to know. All I know is how to recognize a trap when I see it and not fall into it.
It's kind of difficult to try to convince someone who is
No, it's pointless.
just...
and I think you should try to convince people
No.
about it. You're devaluing the actual practice. If somebody needs convincing, they're not going to make the effort necessary for understanding. You need to meet the instruction halfway. If it's shoved down your throat and put on you, it's not. It's going to be seen as something completely different from what it actually is.
I mean, it's not obvious for everybody that sensuality is a danger.
No,
No.
of course not. No.
Mm.
Well, if it were obvious, we wouldn't need all the instruction to free yourself from it. Yeah.